Chapter 1. It's been a long time. The first winter snow in Jiahuang Mountain came unexpectedly with bloodshed, as if the peace hanging between the blades for several years was just waiting for the sword to rise at this moment. In the daytime, Xuezi was careless, echoing the sonorous and cruel sound of handover like playing a harp, and melted into the warm blood before she could even hit the ground, adding a strong sense of solemnity to the river of dead souls. It's night. After a fierce battle, life is tired. The heavy snow came fiercely, covering the sky and earth with one hand to smooth the blood under the feet of the fugitives. Hongi gasped violently. Snowflakes fell on her red dress one after another, and after melting, they filled her with the coldness that seeped into her bones. The man had already chased him 3 mountains away, with no intention of giving up. No matter how hard she tried, it was only the end of her strength. When Xiaojin opened the barrier of the stone-suppressing platform, she was backlashed by the divine power of the mirror boundary stone, and her injuries were severe. And with that person's domineering speed, I'm afraid he will catch up in a moment. She made up her mind and suddenly stopped, only to realize that the fleeing night sky was so miserable, as if it was filled with blood that could not be wiped away in several lifetimes. She said in a deep voice to the man in black next to her, "You go first. Then you keep it and die?" Xiaojin lowered his figure, raised his eyebrows coldly, and sneered at her decision with his usual sarcastic tone. Hongyi covered her blood-swollen chest and calmed down her breath. "Don't worry, I won't die. If nothing else, dash." At this point, the deep pupils under her mask suddenly darkened, and her tone seemed to turn sad. "I will take off the mask." "Stupid. After hiding for 8 years, you still have to fall short." Xiaojin stared at the woods behind her with a sharp night wind, and the next moment he turned around and walked away with his sword without hesitation, saying with disdain, "If you don't return to the imperial capital alive, you will know the consequences. If you want to get out, get out." Hongyi said impatiently and coldly, not a threat at all. The dark shadows of swaying dead branches in the woods became more and more violent, and the Lam wind carried heavy snow and came in a powerful force with murderous intent, trimming the long hair of the red dress and her charming skirt. Seeing Xiaojin walking away, the frown under the red mask relaxed a little. As soon as they turned around, they saw that the man who was chasing them was already standing at the exit of the woods, only a few steps away. Behind him are numerous mountains and the distant black tower that stands high on the top of Jiahuang Mountain. He was still wearing the same black robe, and his graceful face gradually emerged from the darkness. His unruly long hair was blowing in the wind, and the snow was wrapped around his side, as if he was a graceful god descending to earth. Oh, she almost forgot. He was originally the savior in people's eyes, the sword master of the Nanxiong sect of Jiahuang Mountain, Bailey Fengjin. It's just that tonight, this savior's face looks a little not so good. Also, the strong smell of alcohol hit my face. I just vaguely heard that he had been drinking more heavily in the past 8 years than before, so it seems that this rumor is indeed true. Hong has thought about many possibilities in the past 8 years, but after such a long time, the cold confrontation between them at this moment still made her think that several lifetimes had passed. The Long Yuan white sword with a keel core and a jade handle in his hand was still the same as before, the light of the sword flickering in the heavy snow of Jiahuang Mountain. This sword light reminded her of the winter many years ago, when he drunkenly insisted on teaching her how to dance the sword in the heavy snow in the woods under the Mo Tower. The sword energy passed over the wind chimes on the tower and made a pleasant sound, which echoed in the wind and dust. At that time, she pretended to be disdainful and stood aside to watch, refusing to learn. She slandered that he relied on sword dancing to deceive the innocent girl's love, but she clearly saw the helplessness and depression in his sword that he wished he could save the world with his majestic body. But he hid everything. He grabbed her long hair in an unruly manner and refused to give up. He asked her over and over again whether the master was handsome or not. She refused to give in to her life and death. In the end, he fell asleep in the snow without warning after making a fuss. The corners of his mouth were still tilted as he murmured, "Ache is the master handsome." However, tonight, his sword was different from its usual carelessness, showing no trace of murderous intent. "Are you irritated?" Instead, Hong Yi smiled fearlessly. "Anyway, Xiao Jin has already left with the mirror boundary stone." What's ridiculous is that she never thought that due to some strange combination of circumstances, she would risk her own life to protect Xiao Jin, the Empire's lackey. The person she hated so much 8 years ago imprisoned her in an underground Shura field for 4 years, forcing her to become the cruel and ruthless culprit she is now. However, she was not surprised at all by Bailey Fingjian's uncharacteristic behavior tonight. Provoking him is what she has always done. The only difference is that now she can be more unscrupulous by hiding behind a mask and using someone else's identity. After 4 years as a master and apprentice, the relationship between the two of them is unique in the world, just like a lion and a fly who have been at odds for many years. Neither of them can kill each other, but they have already figured out how to pinch each other's weakness accurately and painfully. However, to hurt others, you must hurt yourself first. In order to get away from her during the day and provoke him to say what she said, she also cruelly tore the old wounds from 8 years ago to show him with her own hands. "If you kill me, you won't know the whereabouts of your little apprentice who has not been heard from for so many years. I heard that she is not favored by you, but she foolishly left a drop of her heart to you to say goodbye. I'm really pitiful." As expected, he was stunned for a moment, and as soon as his men were slow, he allowed her to take the opportunity to escape. However, she did not expect that he would be so stunned that he had no time to take care of the leaderless Nanqiong sect and followed her and Xiao Jin across 3 mountains. She knew that the so-called little apprentice definitely meant something special to him, but she didn't expect that this meant more than she imagined. Hong Yi's sad eyes finally disappeared, and she giggled instead. Her soft and waxy voice had an indescribable charm. Her laughter wandered wildly in the desolate air of the mountains, brushing against the cliffs, leaving a lingering feeling. Empty and lonely echoes lingered. Bailey's sword master is really interested. They say that poor criminals should not be chased, but they have followed him all the way. Could it be that you really believe my words and want to know the whereabouts of your little disciple from me? Bailey Fengjian stared at the half-mask on Hong Yi's face, inexplicably feeling extremely anxious. Their voices were really similar, but his Ache would never speak in such a charming and frivolous tone. Ache would either yell at him like an angry little beast, or talk coldly to him like a hedgehog with its quills raised. Counting the master and apprentice for so many years, the number of times they had good conversations was almost handful. And he still remembered that Ache never wore red. When Jun's snow was covered in white behind her, the young Ache took a mouthful of Wunong's soft words and said proudly, "You said I look good in red, but I won't wear it." Yes, Ache looks great in red, like a flower with thorns. When he recalled her, he always thought that his little apprentice was quite beautiful, but once he saw her, he would get irritable and want to strangle her to death. Just as she had always known, he was the Jiahuang sword master, a god worshipped in people's hearts and a famous existence all over the world. But when she faced him, she lost all her patience and reason. Bailey Fengjian had never seen the face under Hong Yi's mask, but he felt inexplicably that if a Chirhua grew up, he would look like Hong Yi with a beautiful face, waist-length hair, and eye-catching pupils as black as obsidian. It's just that this woman in red clothes, no one in the world knows that she is famous for being a troublemaker. She is in charge of 100,000 soldiers in the imperial capital. She can call the shots and do all kinds of evil. She was notorious 20 years ago because she had a soft-spoken Wunong but acted ruthlessly. Speaking of 20 years ago, Ache was still a girl sleeping in the imperial mausoleum. Hong Yi is definitely not Ache. With this conclusion, he felt at ease. Because as long as it's not Ache, he has plenty of ways to deal with women in this world. With a determined arc at the corner of his mouth, Bailey Fengjian slowly stroked the blade of Long Yuan's white sword and raised his eyebrows. Don't say I want to chase you. Even if I let you die at this moment, there is nothing you can do. Really? Since you were planning to kill me, why didn't you do it earlier? Homie covered her mouth again and chuckled mockingly. If she was just a girl from a Jiangnan water town, such a cleansing laugh would probably make the bones of unsuspecting people brittle. While he was talking, Hong Yi had already formed his chi sword. However, her true energy had been exhausted in the fierce battle during the day, and what was left was very little. This attack was made with all her strength, and she even sacrificed a lot of cultivation in it, which was quite decisive. Don't overestimate your capabilities. Shui outlined the outline of Bailey Fengjian, confident of victory, but there was a slight surprise on the corners of his eyebrows. This kind of paranoia that is almost destructive without regard for one's own safety. Che is also like this. When the chi sword was about to get closer, she waved her sleeves and robe to block it, and a gust of wind roared out, forcefully knocking back all the chi swords formed by Hong Yi and disappeared into her body in the blink of an eye. Hong Yi let out a cry of pain, and her body was thrown into the air. She was about to land heavily when she was caught by a mysterious shadow that passed by rapidly. However, the way she caught her was that his long, jade-like hands grabbed her throat, and then he threw her hard against a dead tree. After an instant of suffocation, a large amount of cold air mixed with blood rushed in. Hong Yi hunched over and gasped for air, and a mouthful of blood splashed on the snow with a wow sound, staining his spotless black robe red. The strange thing was that even though it was Hong Yi herself who was defeated in front of him at this moment, she didn't feel very frustrated. Not surprising, she had never been able to defeat him. She never defeated him, unless he lost on purpose. But for such a stubborn person, he would never lose to her on purpose. Where is Che? He pressed forward, losing the last of his patience tonight. His fingers pinched her chin fiercely, forcing her to raise her face. She no longer showed off her words, and her originally casual eyes exuded a cold, murderous intent. The past years are all coming together, but they are also swaying in the wind and snow. She was right in front of him, but she had to be someone else. Hong Yi smiled sadly and frivolously, and his blood-stained lips looked even more seductive. Bailey's sword master is so sincere in seeking a disciple, but Hong Yi has no choice but to let him down. Her last few words whispered softly and charmingly into Bailey Fengjian's ears, with a warm smell of blood in their mouths, making his expression change. By the time he reacted quickly, it was already too late. After an extremely subtle clicking sound, there was the sound of the poison sac hidden in the mouth bursting, and Hong Yi's body fell limply on the snow. Chapter 2 reaped the consequences. Long Yuan's white sword fell to the ground, and Bailey Fengjian almost fed Hong Yi a pill into her mouth at the same time as she fell to the ground. As if he was afraid that the life-saving straw he finally encountered would be broken in the next moment, there was a real urgency in his movements. A series of actions only happened in the blink of an eye, and the sudden turmoil quickly calmed down with the continuous heavy snow. It seemed that the original scene was like this, with Bailey Fengjian squatting in front of Hong Yi for a long time, staring at her, without smiling or expression. Not like him. If there was anything in this world that made him feel powerless, apart from this already terminally ill world, the other one must be Che. For the sake of news about Che, he actually lost his sense of control to this point. Today, he left the disciples of the Nanqiong sect in dire straits and tried to save a villain who everyone wanted to kill. But after thinking about it for so many years, he still couldn't figure out which step he went wrong back then, and which step he had to do over again. What's more, even 8 years later, he still didn't believe in Che's innocence. After a while, Bailey Fengjian thought of something again and reached out to try to take off the mask on Hong Yi's face, only to find that the mask was made of telepathy. If she didn't loosen her telepathy, she couldn't take it off. Bailey Fengjian retracted his hand. The black distant mountains are connected to the desolate night sky, and the white snowflakes are sweeping across the entire earth. At a glance, only the red color in front of me is pure. There was endless darkness all around, and a bone-piercing cold. Homie opened his eyes and smiled slowly at the darkness cut by the fine iron bars. Suddenly, she moved her arm, and the thick black iron chain that penetrated her bones swayed, and the heavy clanking sound was heard continuously, which also touched the wounds left on her body after being tortured, and the pain that had solidified spread again. It's not the first time I've come here. I've been here 8 years ago, and I found that even the torture process here remains unchanged. The pain she felt before was so far away that she was about to forget it. Now she was unconscious, no matter how severe the punishment was. This Jiahuang mountain is still like this. It has stood for thousands of years. The sea of pine trees, the cliffs and strange rocks, and even the plants, trees, bricks and tiles have never changed in any way because of her departure. It was her who had changed. She lost 3 of her 7 souls and lived a life of ignorance for 8 years with a miserable body. When she remembered in a daze, she was in the back mountain and saw that Yunqin Peak, which she had spent time with Bailey Fengjian day and night, was still as white as the white horse bones that drove all over the mountain. It was so pure that one glance wiped away the wanderings of several lifetimes. That year's 100 miles of wind opened up Luofushan, which had been brewed for 120 years in the sea of white horse bones. She leaned slantingly in the pavilion, squinting her eyes and twisting a smile that confuses all living beings, and said to her from a distance, "Ah Che, this 100-year-old wine, the master is going to be drunk." It was a very rare moment in her memory, a peaceful relationship between them. He was really almost drunk to talk to her like that. In fact, Hong Yi also regretted it. If she had known that she would be facing him with swords drawn, she should have kept more good memories. After all, he was a master and disciple. It's not like she hasn't envied other masters and apprentices who are kind and filial, but if this scene was between her and Bailey Foam, it would feel inappropriate even if she thought about it. In the darkness, the distant voice that was only in the memory suddenly came close at hand, unhurriedly, with lazy determination in his tone. It lasted longer than I thought. Homie wanted to laugh. Everyone else had seen him look calm and composed, but she was the only one who had seen him furious and wanting to strangle her to death. Then Hongyi really laughed out loud, sounding cold in the silent prison. Isn't this what a prison as big as Nanxiong can only do? Compared to the severe punishments in the imperial capital's prisons, it's really a far cry from it. Today's Bailey Kazama looks completely different from the aggressive one last night. In fact, this is his usual face. He leaned against the iron railing and smiled lazily. He didn't answer immediately. He just felt that Hong Yi's words didn't sound like showing off, but instead contained a kind of sadness for the past. Why, has she also been in the imperial capital prison? When the thought came to him, Bailey Fengjian only felt vaguely confused, but subconsciously ignored it. He just calmly said, "I don't have much ability, so I came here in person." "How can you defeat me?" After counting all over the world, Hongyi was probably one of the few people who was not afraid of him. He asked sarcastically at this moment, "At least I know Jingqi's whereabouts, and you don't." "You'll say it because you don't want to die yet." Bailey Fengjian Shiran straightened up from the iron railing. Hongyi heard the sound of a gourd stopper being opened, and a faint smell of Luofushan wine filled the air. He took a sip of wine, gathered up his robe, and turned sideways to face Hongyi. That graceful face was so close, and it was clearly visible that the green stubble on his chin was growing at will, and his 2 unruly eyebrows flew into his temples. A calm and grand light like glass flowed in his eyes. "Last night, I thought you would rather die than give in, but what you swallowed was just a pill that closed your mind. If you really want to die, why are you here?" "I don't want to die, but you don't want me to die either. So, I'm curious, what are you threatening me with?" Bailey Fengjian was not in a hurry to refute and raised the corner of his mouth. "Want to give it a try?" His voice was extremely gentle, and his deep voice was filled with the moisture of wine, as if he was drunk. The wine is still Luofushin, but I don't know if the wine that has been aged for 8 more years will still taste the same as before. Hami said with a strong tone, "Oh, I also want to broaden my horizons." Bailey Fengjian's eyes were originally drunken and lazy, but at this moment, a precise and fierce light flashed across. Before he could see his movements, Hongi's chin was pinched hard, forcing him to raise his head and stare into Bailey Fengjian's eyes. Hongi stopped struggling and gave a frivolous smile. This was the most proficient expression she had practiced over the years. The gesture of Bailey Sword Master is quite ambiguous. "What do you want to do?" Bailey Fengjian curled his lips lazily. "Since Hongi thinks so, then I will help you." He suddenly firmly held Hongi's waist and leaned forward to cover her lips. The dark iron chain that penetrated the bones of the red Peepa shook in response, and she was stunned. Many years ago, this was what she had expected in those pink dreams, but now it was like a quagmire shrouded in nightmares. She reacted and violently tried to break away, but he pried open her lips and teeth regardless, and the clear fragrance of wine mixed with blood came overwhelmingly, and then a soft and cold pill rolled into her throat. Bailey Fengjian left her lips and raised his sleeve to wipe the blood from the bite on his mouth. Even if he did such an out-of-proportion thing, he still had an indifferent expression. He admitted that from the first moment he saw red clothes, he understood that red clothes were like a poison of temptation. Because she looks like a Che, but also because she is not a Che. Emotions were inevitably ups and downs. Bailey Fengjian calmed himself down, straightened up, and concealed the expression on his face. "Scarlet Mingu, I believe you have heard of it. This is a kind of refining poison that has been lost in Miao territory. The poison will seep into the essence and blood and absorb people's spiritual practice until the person is hollowed out into an empty shell with no will, but will not die. People with high cultivation often rely on a little willpower to survive severe torture, but once they lose their will, they spit out everything. Red Mingu was the most vicious method used to extract confessions. It was so terrifying that it was gradually lost." Before Hong Yi could react to the fierceness just now, her face turned pale behind the mask. "It's just this goo. It got it from the Miaozhong priest back then." Bailey Fengjian's eyes darkened slightly, and he stared at Hong Yi calmly. "Don't want something that will let ache down." After saying that, he turned around and left, leaving another sentence in a loud voice. "If you had spoken earlier, I would have given you a happy life. I guess you don't want to be neither human nor ghost, neither alive nor dead." It took a while before Hong Yi came back to her senses. A few drops of blood were bitten out of her red lips, which still had the smell of him, and they had already condensed in the cold air. As expected, they still couldn't escape from that mode, giving them a little sweetness and a few hard slaps. She couldn't tell whether it was the poison or his kiss that was torturing her heart at the moment. This time she admitted that he had won so beautifully. As expected, she reaped the consequences. Hongi suddenly laughed, and the laughter was filled with hot despair, which stunned those outside the fairy prison who were about to enter. "Uncle, what's inside?" The male voice was clear and respectful. "It doesn't matter." The whistling sound of the wind blowing through the woods outside became louder, which made Bailey Fengjian's words calm and calm. "Have the injured disciples been arranged?" Hongi stopped laughing, and her heart suddenly tightened. The person talking to Bailey Fengjian must be Xiao, that senior brother who is always meticulous, cold, and indifferent, now seems to be the head disciple of the main peak. It seems that what happened back then has not had any impact on him, and the headmaster values him after all. The bones of the disciples who died in the battle have been collected, and the injured disciples have been sent to Uncle Lu for treatment. The headmaster is still in retreat, and the disciples have not reported this matter. Needless to say, can you find out the reason why the Empire suddenly attacked the Nanqiong sect? Judging from the situation on the back mountain of Yinqin Peak, it seems that Imperial Major Generals Xiao Jin and Hong Yi wanted to steal the Mirror Boundary Stone. However, They were counterattacked by the divine power of the stone-suppressing platform. They were discovered when they fled in a hurry, which triggered a fierce battle. Oh, they've all entered the Stone Town platform. He put away his lazy expression and frowned slightly. Disciple has another strange thing, Yeshio said hesitantly. Bailey Fengjian gestured for him to continue. I heard from the surviving disciples that Xiao Jin wanted to kill him, but was stopped by Hong Yi. The disciple always felt something strange, so he wanted to come and see Hong Yi. Bailey Fengjian squinted in the snowy sky. Go in. Yeshio raised his head slightly, with a cold and serious expression, but his tone was still respectful. Uncle, I heard that Hong Yi looks like a Che. Bailey Fengjian didn't seem to be touched. He didn't know what he was thinking and didn't answer. After a while, he untied the wine gourd from his waist and slowly took a sip of wine. Go in. Chapter 3. So different. Yishio stood calmly in front of Hong Yi and didn't speak for a long time. His eyes were so sharp that he seemed to want to cut out every inch of Hong Yi's bones before he stopped. After seeing each other like this, his practice has greatly improved now, and he has not changed the appearance of the past. His face is like a crown jade, his eyebrows are sword-shaped, and his eyes are starry. His body is tall and straight, and his expression is calm. Hong Yi finally felt a little guilty when he saw it, and sarcastically said in a cold voice, You are standing here looking at me in such a good mood. Why not go out and enjoy the heavy snow on Jiahuang Mountain? Yishio's face was as cold as the distant mountains, and he was indifferent to her ridicule. After standing for a long time, he pressed his lips as thin as a sword tightly, as if to suppress a slight tremor, which he concealed without any flaws. He frowned and said in a cold voice with a hint of helplessness, What are you doing here, troublemaker? Hearing this, Hong Yi was suddenly shocked. She didn't dare to raise her eyes, but fortunately the mask hid her expression. She insisted on hiding her ears, as if no one else could see it, and the hurricane that suddenly set off a shocking storm in her heart no longer existed. He twitched the corner of his mouth, but there were thousands of words to say, but no words to answer. In the end, he could only close his eyes and remain silent. Why did it become like this? Yishio stared at her intently. His tone was exactly the same as when she was scolded by him after she got into trouble many years ago. As if no time had passed, she listened to his cold and concise lectures on Jiahuang Mountain and ran away impatiently. Behind her back, he helped her take the blame without saying a word and acted as her protective shield. Even in the end, he was the only person who believed in her and let her go. Even now that she had abandoned her people and the world that her master wanted to save and stood on the opposite side of them, he did not blame her. He just asked her why she came back to suffer since she left. Now, every word he said was hammered into her heart. Why does it become like this? How was she going to tell him? During the 8 years since she left, for the first 4 years, she was imprisoned in the underground Shura field where assassins were selected in the imperial capital because she refused to succumb to Xiao Jin. She had to pick up a knife and kill people every day in order to survive and have the life to resist. She was suddenly uprooted from her ivory tower and thrown into the fire, and this was what she had to become. She will not forget the bloodshed in the Shura field. Every day, the victors of their companions are taken out to start a new life, but she is the only one who is locked up without seeing the light of day. Even if she picks up the knife and twitches, she will continue numbly. She didn't answer. She didn't know where to start. In the past 8 years, she has been tossed from one darkness to another. Her habitual silence and suffering alone have turned her from the outspoken girl she was back then into a calm and ruthless person. Speak. Yeshio frowned and scolded impatiently. Hong Yi finally raised her eyes, and the moment she looked at him, she seemed to be frozen in the wind and the moon, forgetting the time. She didn't want to hide it from the senior brother, who treated her the best. Yes, as Xiao Jin said, after 8 years of hiding, he still failed. She relaxed her telekinesis and removed the mask from her face. In 8 years, this face showed its true appearance for the first time in the exposed air. Her face was so white that it was almost transparent, showing the determination that she refused to give in under torture, and the cinnabar red tear mole at the corner of her eye painted a few faint strokes of tenderness on her cold face. The fingers that were also repaired in the robe slowly clasped into the palm of the hand. She used to be the most beautiful female disciple on Jiahuang Mountain. Now she is still beautiful, but with a coldness that cannot be looked at. If she was a surging and proud mountain spring at that time, now she is like ice on a 100-foot cliff. 3 feet of ice is not a day's cold, and Yeshio can't imagine what kind of life she has lived for so many years, so that the lively and arrogant girl can transform into a thin and sharp silhouette. Those eyes that once shone with the color of the sky and sunshine of Mount Jiahuang are now filled with faint tears, dripping down, converging into a torrent of time, roaring through the darkness. Senior brother Xiao, long time no see. It's been a long time. Yeshio took a few steps forward, but he couldn't get past the iron fence between them. I didn't expect that it was you in red. What he said before was just a test. If she hadn't been willing to admit it, he wouldn't have been sure that Hong Yi was a Che. Because he personally let her go 8 years ago and knew her whereabouts later, he dared to have doubts. Seeing that she didn't answer, Yeshio added, "Wearing a mask, it's really ugly. Without wearing a mask, I'm afraid I won't be able to see Brother Xiao alive." Hongyi smiled slowly and silently. She knew that Yishio was feeling sorry for her, but his taciturn nature prevented him from saying too much. It's not that she hasn't regretted it. She even thought about why she didn't fall in love with Yishio in the first place. But back then, she had spent all her efforts as a girl to confront Bailey Fengjian, and being emotionally involved by him, she had no energy to see others. She had hit the restricted area and could not get out. As if to reassure her, Yishio finally smiled uncomfortably, and his tone was not as tight as before. "Can you stand up?" Huh. Hongyi was stunned. "I'll take you out of here." Yishio seemed to be explaining something that was extremely natural. "No." She refused hastily, speaking Wu Nong's words softly, but with firmness. "What else do you want to do here?" Yeshio frowned. "Have you not seen enough of the immortal prison in Nanxiong?" "I'm happy to visit the old place again, so I won't bother Brother Xiao." Hongyi turned away, feeling inexplicably annoyed. Annoyed that he always protects and excuses himself at all costs. Even now that he is the chief disciple, he doesn't care that letting her go is a serious sin against the master, and still gives her his selfishness. She was even more annoyed with herself for always dragging him into the water and causing him to be implicated. They have been in love for so many years, and what she fears most is that they still don't get it right. But Yeshio was very aware of her weakness and why she was so stubborn. "If you don't leave, I will tell my uncle." Hong Yi's face turned even colder, and his voice suddenly turned cold. "Senior brother Xiao, do you want him to reunite with me? Or do you want him to see how prosperous his evil disciples are in that rotten imperial capital, so that he can throw me into the 9 heavens holy fire again, burning even the remaining 4 souls to pieces?" Only 4 of the 7 souls are left. Even though the situation was calm, Yishio was shocked when he heard this. Hongyi frowned and said, "There is no need to mention the past." Yeshio sighed silently, fully understanding that the girl in front of him was different after all. Even though she was still calling him senior brother, the resistance in her words could not be eliminated by this already ethereal relationship. Dressed in red and wearing a mask, he burned the past. Sensing Yishio's sudden sigh, Hongyi softened his tone slightly. "Brother Xiao, I want to ask you something." "You say." "Use the sinking blood art to seal my consciousness into my soul," she said.